Make some noise. Hadithi, Hadithi.
Please help me welcome Thandwefika Tshabalala.
So I was born in Soweto, and as soon as my father could, he moved us to a small town called Malvern, just in the backside of Eastgate. Now in '94, Malvern was a very unique place, and I'd like to tell you a tale about what we experienced between Malvern and Eastgate. One of my favorite things to do with my father was on Sunday morning, we would go shopping at Eastgate. And I was his little co-pilot. Everywhere we went, he would find me there, seated right next to him in a cherry red Ford Bantam two-seater. The same Ford Bantam is the one we used to go to work with as I worked with him on the weekends. One particular Sunday, as we went to Eastgate, we parked by the parking and a very tall, dark gentleman knocked on the window. He says, "Excuse me, I see you have a bakkie. I need a lift to somewhere close. I'll pay you for your efforts. It won't take you too long. Can you take us, please?" My father asked him, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Bruma." Now, if you know Eastgate, you know Bruma is just across the road. You don't need transportation to get to Bruma. You can walk there. So immediately my father's guard was up. He says, "Look, man, I'm carrying something that I don't want to get mugged in. And we know in Johannesburg, we get mugged all the time. So give me this lift and I'll give you 300 Rand and you just take me across the road to Bruma." Now this is 1995. 300 bucks was a lot of money in 1995. I could literally see my father do the math in his head. Look beside him at me, realize that they could make space if only I sat between the gears of this Ford Bantam. Of course, he agreed, 300 bucks in pocket. The gentleman sat beside us, and I straddled the gear, like I've done so many times in my life before. Off we went to Bruma. And as we drive into Bruma, this tall, dark gentleman keeps opening the box, looking inside, smiling to himself, and closing it. After 100 meters, he does it again. He opens the box, looks inside, smiles at himself, and closes it. On the third time, my father says, "What's in the box?" The guy says, "Don't worry about what's in the box, you got paid." He says, "Look, if I'm gonna transport you something, I need to know what's in the box." And then he stops the car. The guy says, "Okay, fine, I'll tell you. I'm carrying unique gemstones and diamonds from Sierra Leone and Tanzania and all the other countries up north. And I'm transporting this to conclude a deal which will bring me 150,000 rands. The reason why I asked you for transportation is that I want to walk to Bruma. If I get mugged, it's a very big mugging for me." At this point, my father thinks about his decisions in life. And decides that, nope, he's not going to do this. He says, "Look, I can't transport you. This is illegal. I don't want any part of it." To which the gentleman answers, "I'll give you 10%. 10% is 15,000 Rand, which was a lot of money back in 1995. So of course, my father did the math again, looked at me, and decided that they should pay for my varsity fees in a few years' time. So off we went to Bruma. We get to a Chinese mall in Bruma, and we stop there. And this tall, dark gentleman reaches into his bag and pulls out a phone. I do this because that's what the size of phones in 95. Opens up the phone and he makes a phone call. "Hello? Hello? Yes, I'm here." And hangs up. 2 minutes later, another tall, dark gentleman walks up to the window, carrying a briefcase. The gentleman rolls down his window and says, "You got my money?" The one opens the bag and it's full of cash. Closes it again. Says, "You got my stones?" The gentleman opens the box and closes it again. The gentleman outside asks, "Do you have cutting oil. To which the guy in the car replies, ish, that's the one thing I don't have. It's Johannesburg. It's a bit difficult to get cutting oil in Johannesburg right now. I'll tell you what, I'll knock out 50,000 from the price and give it to you for 100,000 rand, and then you can find your own cutting oil. The guy outside goes crazy, goes, are you mad? Do you know how difficult it is to find cutting oil in Johannesburg? I can get stones from anywhere. In fact, I could have gotten the stones myself. The reason I got them from you is you can find cutting oil and I can't. My friend, come back when you're serious. No cutting oil, no deal. And storms off with a suitcase full of cash. So sitting there in that car park, in suspense, a tall, dark gentleman, myself straddled between the two gears, and my father looking around wondering what's going on. The gentleman finally speaks and goes, look, can you do me a favor? I'll pay you more money. Can you take me somewhere where we can find cutting oil? He says, where are you going to find cutting oil? Because this gentleman says it's hard. He goes, I'll call a few friends. Out comes the phone again. Dials the first number. Hello? Hello? Do you have cutting oil? No? Never mind. Second number. Do you have cutting oil? Never mind. Third number. Do you have cutting oil? Yes, you do. Where are you? Queens High. I'll be there right now. Now, Queens High is about 9 kilometers from where we were. A very short drive. So he turns to my father and goes, we're going to Queens High to fetch a guy who's got the cutting oil. Let's go. So off we go from Bruma all the way up the road to Queens High. When we finally get there, we find this tall, dark gentleman standing there in a suit. He says, my guy, you looking for cutting oil? I got cutting oil. You got money? He goes, how much is the cutting oil? 15,000 rand. So I don't have 15,000 rand. I've got about 2,000 in my pocket. But we've done business before. Give me the cutting oil for 2,000 rand. Let me finish my deal. Once I finish my deal, I'll come back and pay you for the cutting oil. This story is starting to get long. So after a bit of negotiation, the price comes down to 12,000, and that's the limit of what he has. To which the gentleman turns to my father and says, look, I only got 2,000. If you give me 10,000, we've got enough for cutting oil. And I'll cut you in a little bit more on the deal. Instead of 10%, we'll increase this to 20%. Now, 30,000 is a lot of money for 1995. My father does the math again, considers his risks, and decides, no cutting oil, no deal. So we find ourselves off going to Standard Bank, where we went in and he withdrew the last cent that he had in his account. The money he had saved from all those trips he had done over the years, working on Saturdays and Sundays and taking me with. In the envelope it goes, we hand it to the gentleman. We get our cutting oil, the thing that will make the deal. With cutting oil in hand, stones on hand, we have everything we need to conclude this deal. And a few steps from 150,000 rand. The tall dark gentleman calls the buyer, only to find he's moved from Bruma. He's now in Eastgate. So we drive to Eastgate, and as we park at the parking bay in Eastgate, he turns to my father and says, you know, that was odd what he did. I don't trust him anymore. So here's the plan. You hold on to these diamonds, and let me go check if they're there. After 5 minutes, follow me. When we get there, we conclude the deal. You take the money, you come back and wait for me in the car. But my father's from Soweto. He's clever. He says, I don't want the stones. Give me the cutting oil. He takes the cutting oil, puts it beside him, and the gentleman goes inside to go see whether the buyer is still there. After 5 minutes, he hasn't come back. After 10, he hasn't come back. After 15, we go looking for him. We go to the Wimpy where he said he's going to meet his buyer, and he's nowhere to be found. We spent that afternoon walking up and down that mall, every level of all 3 levels that Eastgate had back then. We went into every store. We went around the car park and couldn't find the tall, dark gentleman. Eventually, we gave up and headed back home. And when my father told this story to my mother and showed him the cutting oil, we realized this was the most expensive bottle of olive oil we've ever bought in our lives. After fuming for a week, my mother took that bottle and placed it on top of the keister, so that every time we pass it, we may be reminded of the story. In fact, for years, every argument in our household ended with the words, "No cutting oil, no D." Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Thandwefika Tshabalala one more time. Well, I've been friends with Thando for a little over 3 years now, and I was always wondering why he's so skeptical every time I bring a deal to him.
Make some noise. Hadithi, Hadithi.